Today I'd like to talk to you about estate planning, and it's our view that everyone really needs to consider their estate planning, even if they happen to be quite young. So we would suggest that even if you're 18, you need to have a will in place. Another important thing to remember is if you've been married, actually getting married will automatically cancel a previous will that you had in place, and the same thing happens if you go through a divorce. So in both of those instances, you actually need to take the time to put a new will in place. So if you've built up an asset base, and over time a lot of people are able to do that, what this really represents is a lifetime of effort. So it's our view that it's really worth putting or spending the $500 or so amount on getting a solicitor to do a will for you and making that commitment. Another thing to remember is that your superannuation is actually directed by the beneficiary nomination that you put in place. It doesn't automatically pass through your will as an estate asset unless you direct it to do so. So there are actually two different things there. We think a will is really a working document, and it needs to be reviewed every 2 to 3 years as a minimum, just to ensure that what your wishes are actually reflected in that document and that they're current. So the main things to think about for you when you do your will and put your estate planning together is who are your executors? And these are the people who are actually administering your will and carrying out your estate wishes. So you want those people ideally to be very familiar with your situation and also familiar with what you're actually wanting to have happen. Another thing to consider if you've got children under the age of 18 is who the guardians are for those children. And you might also want to let those guardians know that you've nominated them in your will. Further consideration needs to be given to what ages you'd like your children to access any of the estate assets, and that really differs for everyone. It might be that you are happy for your children to have access at age 18, or it might also be the case that you would rather them access at, say, 25 or age 30. If your children happen to be young and you pass away prematurely, then you really need to give consideration to who would be looking after any estate assets for your children and how you'd actually like that to be carried out, so whether it should be in a trust or something similar. Further consideration needs to be given to whether or not you've set your will up, perhaps accidentally, so that it could be contested, and this is something that you really want to avoid at all costs. If you've got multiple children, think about whether or not your estate is taking note of some kind of equalisation between your children, and that's particularly important if you have lumpy assets. Further to that, we'd suggest that people include a memorandum of wishes document with their will, and that's really a letter or something similar that outlines why you've made decisions that you have in your will and specifically how you would like those wishes to be carried out. It's something that sits alongside your will. And lastly, we really think it's very important that people have an enduring power of attorney in place, and that's a document that comes into play if you happen to lose mental capacity, and it's where you've nominated people to make decisions on your behalf, and they can be both health and financial, so it's extremely important.